Hi friends, my name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. I want to talk about the recent video I did about Extinction Rebellion, ignoring the elephant in the room, veganism. And some people have made comments that Robert Hallam or whoever made a decision that veganism was somehow some personal choice in quotes, and that these political demonstrations are where it's at basically. So they sort of don't see that talking about veganism or promoting veganism is something that it should be included in the Extinction Rebellion's campaigns and on their site and stuff. That's what I've understood as some people who've been defending Extinction Rebellion in that regard of their ignoring veganism. Well, there's a few things I have to say about that. Firstly, I'm sure people have heard the saying, the personal is the political. You can't really separate those two things. Secondly, for me, something that is so obviously such a central part of the why the planet is burning up, or it's basically erratic, and there's a 6 mass extinction, and the oceans are acidifying, and there's dead zones and all of that, rainforests being cut down. There's a whole long list of disastrous consequences of each one of us not being vegan, not the least of which is that 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year are tortured and killed for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure, since we don't need animal products to survive, and since we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we can give for participating in this great violence is because we think animal products taste good. That's all we have, because there is no good reason to continue eating and wearing and using animals. So that's the second thing. So there really isn't any good basis for doing that in the first place. And so that's the most important reason to be vegan. It's their planet too, and we are destroying their home. That's the second issue, which it's their planet too. So we have no rights to be doing that. And when we are not vegan, we are allowing all those things that I talked about in the last video, which I won't go into here, but I'll probably share that meme again from the largest study undertaken from the UK. That went to 40,000 farms in 114 countries, and the conclusion from farm to fork, the 90% of the products we eat, they came to the conclusion that becoming vegan was the single biggest action one could take to address not only the climate crisis, but acidification, eutrophication, the 6 mass extinction, and all those other things that animal agriculture, there's too many to list. There's so many. Okay, so this is what the largest study to date, their conclusion was. Adopting a plant-based diet. That was the conclusion. So if people want to live in denial of science and be science deniers, basically, that's your choice. But you should not be wringing your hands about imminent extinction and that kind of thing when you are not vegan, because that is just so much. There's so much evidence that animal agriculture is a major contributor to this climate crisis and all the other problems, and many of the other problems that we have that are sort of really frightening. If we can't sort of acknowledge that, then what on earth are we doing? And how are we any different from these other green groups that purposefully ignore veganism? Not only that, but they actually disparage it. And they try and downplay it, even though it's really obvious at this point that it is a disaster. It is an ecological disaster, animal agriculture, and we are responsible if we are not vegan, because we are creating demand for animal products. And cutting back doesn't cut it. It doesn't. So, you know, I can't see how people can make, you know, since the personal is the political, and that it ceases to be a personal choice. It ceases to be a personal choice when it involves the torture and killing of 1 trillion land and aquatic sentient animals every year, plus. It ceases to be a personal choice when we are contributing to world hunger because of the huge amounts of grain, usually from countries that can't afford to part with it and they have their own hunger issues, and they're sending this grain off to these large animal agriculture feeding lots. You know, and there's huge amounts of grain to make 1 pound of beef. You know, like 7 pounds of grain to make, you know, 1 pound of beef or something like that. I've listed those things in the last video. Please check it out. I don't have time right now to go through it. There is, if you check out all the things I talked about in the last video, and you're not moved by that, then I don't know what to tell you. You know, and let's just get one thing straight. Governments, no matter how much you plead, no matter you can, I mean, I'm all for nonviolent civil disobedience, but unless you have a massive grassroots nonviolent civil disobedience, and maybe that might turn out that way, probably by the time it does, it'll be way, way, way too late. I think it's too late now, but that's okay. We should keep doing what we can, right? But if you're expecting by trying to plead with the government to do something, to change the trajectory that they're on, and that they're on in a hurry, which is to overthrow governments for oil like they're trying to do in Venezuela, and they have no interest in stopping using fossil fuels. The oligarchy has no interest in stopping using fossil fuels. And if you think that the governments in the world are going to do anything that's meaningful, then you're, I'm sorry, but you're deluded. It's important to do this nonviolent civil disobedience, and I don't know if it will be met with extreme force. It probably will be. I mean, you only have to see what's happening to the yellow vests in France. All the yellow vests are trying to do is push for social equality and fairness, and also the end of neoliberalism, because this whole trickle-down thing was a joke. And there's more inequality now than ever before, and there's rich people that are massively wealthy, and there's most people are there's a lot of people in poverty today. Look at the amount of force that Macron is putting on yellow vest movement. And you know, they've had their hands. People have had their hands blown off and their eyes blown. You know, sort of ablated and all sorts of things because of, you know, this extraordinary amount of force that has been applied to these people. And you know, and if push comes to shove, that's what's going to happen when nonviolent civil disobedience happens. But I think it's very important that people do nonviolent civil disobedience, but I doubt that any government is really going to respond to that, because they're committed to the corporations, they're committed to using fossil fuels. So where does that leave us then, if governments aren't going to respond? And I can guarantee they're not going to in any meaningful matter, if at all. In fact, Donald Trump is going the other way.
Well, it's kind of interesting to see the way across the spectrum how this is being dealt with. I mean, at the right, say the Trump administration produced one of the most astonishing documents that has ever existed in human history. I'm not exaggerating. A bureaucracy, naturally. The Transportation Bureau came out with a long, detailed document which was arguing, it was leading to the conclusion that we shouldn't have any constraints on emissions in transportation, cars, trucks, and so on. Just let them emit everything, no matter what. And it had a very interesting argument. The argument was, look, at the rate of global warming now taking place, by the end of the century, it'll be maybe, they estimated, 7 degrees or something like that, higher. And by then, we're basically over the cliff anyway. There's no chance of survival after that. So what the hell? Why not just enjoy it while we can? Of course, the tacit assumption is that everyone in the world is as criminally insane as we are, as they are, and will not try to do anything about it. Can you find any document like that in human history? I mean, Nero is supposed to have filled while Rome burned. These guys are saying, let's enjoy ourselves while the planet burns to make more profit for the next couple of years.
It invites the phrase institutional insanity. The evidence is all around us. It's no longer just models of climate scientists. It's devastating floods, it's devastating hurricanes, it's rising sea levels, it's spreading disease because of habitat changes, it's extinction of species. And these people who are in power have got their heads in the sand, or their minds are so monetized by ExxonMobil and others that they refuse to see what's coming up. I mean,
where it leaves us is that we are responsible for our own actions. And nobody needs to give us permission to do the right thing, and that is to be vegan. No one. No one needs to give us permission to do that. We can do that right now. We don't need permission from our parents. We don't need permission from the government. We don't need permission from corporations. We don't need permission from our friends and family. We don't need permission from Extinction Rebellion or any other green group that is ignoring veganism. We can do that right now. And I don't know why anybody would join a group that has made a decision to ignore veganism and uses this weak source excuse that somehow it's a personal choice, in quotes. That veganism is a personal choice. As I said, it ceases to be a personal choice when we are killing 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year for completely trivial reasons, and we're destroying the planet and the oceans. We're fishing out the oceans. They'll be empty in 2040. We're knocking down Amazon rainforests at 1 acre. It's either every second or every minute to make way for animal agriculture and soy to feed animals in these CAFO, these feedlots overseas. That's 1 acre. Every minute or every second, I can't remember which one it is, but that's whichever way, it's tremendously bad. For every 1 pound of target fish that's caught, there are 4 or 5 pounds of fish, 4 or 5 pounds of aquatic animals. That includes turtle, whales, dolphins, and sharks, etc. A lot of the animals that we fetishize are being thrown overboard and they're dead. That's why the oceans are going to be empty by 2048, if not sooner. You need to go and join Seaspiracy on Instagram and see the disaster that is our non-veganism. Just go and see the disaster that is our non-veganism, what it's doing to the oceans, and all these animals that we fetishize, like dolphins and whales. And the sixth mass extinction is a direct result, as this study has shown, this largest study to date, is a direct result of our non-veganism. It's a direct result of animal agriculture, but we create demand for that. We create demand for animal products, so we are responsible for the sixth mass extinction directly. Does that sound like a personal choice to you? That's just one of a gazillion things that is wrong with animal agriculture and our non-veganism, not being vegan. Does that sound like a personal choice to you? Does it? It doesn't sound like that to me. You know, almost, I can compare this to, this is my comparison, it's like an abolitionist group or abolitionists in the days of legal slavery. And instead of saying to the public, you need to stop using slaves, free the slaves that you have, and then promote the abolition of slavery to other people. That's what Extinction Rebellion is not doing, but that's what the equivalent of that is if abolitionists sort of said, you don't have to worry about freeing your slaves, please continue using those slaves as property, those human slaves, please continue. I'm not going to ask you to free your slaves, please continue. And you don't need to ask other people to free their slaves. That's how ridiculous it is when green groups and groups like Extinction Rebellion do not say to people, you need to go vegan. I'm vegan and you need to go vegan. Because animal agriculture is the greatest driver now of all the things, most of the things that are wrong. And it's, as you can see from that study, if you take a moment to look at it, it is disastrous. So I don't know if you can see it's like when people say, I'm an animal lover, but I'm not vegan. It makes no sense to me. And when people say, I'm an environmentalist and I'm not vegan, that makes no sense to me. And if they say, I'm an environmentalist, I belong to Greenpeace, but Greenpeace doesn't mention veganism, that makes no sense to me. It's exactly the same as if an abolitionist way back said, I never suggest to people to free their slaves. And not only that, but in our abolitionist group, we have people who own slaves. So we want money, we want donations for our campaigns, so we're not going to challenge the public on freeing their slaves. But meanwhile, we're suggesting to people that the slavery needs to end, human slavery needs to end. That's how silly this is, right? That is my comparison. So to deny that animal agriculture is destroying the planet and is one of the great, more than cars, trains and buses and everything else, more than the transport sector, it's 51% of greenhouse gases. The World Watch Institute report said that. It's a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. To pretend, when the science is there saying that, animal agriculture is worse than all these transport sector combined, and then to say, well, but veganism is some personal choice in quotes, and instead we'll just tell people to stop driving cars and stuff. I mean, seriously, what kind of an excuse is that? That's just science denying. And by the way, driving cars is a personal choice. And so is surrounding yourself with plastic, or deciding whether you want fracking on your land, or there's a whole bunch of things that could be considered personal choices. So how come veganism is this personal choice, but driving cars you think that people are going to easily give up driving cars? Of course they're not. And some of us don't have any real alternative. Like, for example, where I live, we live a ways out of town, and there is no decent public transport. They've made it so they've basically gotten rid of most public transport. This is what right-wing governments do, or governments that are catering to corporations instead of thinking about people and the climate, right? We actually have to drive a car. If we drove a bicycle, it would take us probably 3 hours to get into town, and it would be impossible to get back because there's so many major hills. Major hills. I mean, we'd have to be really, really, really young and fit to be able to do that. So, you know, it's actually not possible for people like me, right? But there are a lot of people, even in urban areas, they've actually cut back on public transport. It's just such a dysfunctional mess, a cluster F, the way cities have been planned for a lot of cities. Some cities are luckier than others, like Germany and, Berlin. But you know, there's a lot of poorly planned urban planning, and they're cutting back on public transport, just making it harder for people. So anyway, it's things like that. You know, it's not realistic to say, but it would be nice if we had alternative. I mean, they killed the electric car back in, I don't know, back in the 60s. They bought the patents and then got rid of it, the oil industry. They got rid of all the electric trams in San Francisco. And, you know, basically it was all favoring fossil fuels. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I don't even know why I have to explain this. See, I just feel like this is willful ignorance on people's part, somehow saying that a central driver to the climate crisis is sort of not really relevant, and it's something that we can all ignore, and we'll just do our political actions, and that will get us somewhere. It may get us somewhere, the nonviolent civil disobedience, but what about the continuation of our consuming animal products? It's still destroying the planet in a major way. So what are you going to do? You're going to wait until governments magically submit, and then you're going to go vegan? I mean, does that make sense? I don't see that there's any sort of... I think people think that if we can get governments to do what we want, then we won't have to go vegan. We can still munch on our products of violence. We can still ingest all that death, and that'll be just fine. You know, because, well, you know, I mean, the thing is, it's not necessary, and it's still destroying the planet. It's a major driver of the sixth mass extinction. And not only that, have you seen the Chris Hedges on Contact thing about the looming food crisis, and how if we keep relying on animal agriculture to feed us, we're all going to starve anyway, because it actually can't keep up with demand, even with all the awful industrialized farming.
By 2050, the world's population is expected to reach nearly 9.8 billion. Most of this increase will occur in the global south. To feed a population of this size, we will have to produce more food in the next 40 years than was consumed in the last 10,000 years. If we continue to rely on the animal agriculture industry to feed us, the planetary food supply will soon suffer severe shortages, leading to massive hunger, malnutrition, starvation, and widespread unrest. Industrial animal agriculture already occupies more than half of the world's arable land and resources. It consumes most of our water. It expels more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector. It is polluting and often poisoning the water, soil, and air, and deforesting the planet, as well as causing species extinction. The clash between overpopulation and a species reliant on the animal agriculture industry is a recipe for global catastrophe.
Watch that, the looming food crisis. By 2050, we'd need way more food than what we could ever get from animal agriculture. It's completely unsustainable. And as you can see by the second meme, allow me to post it again and see how much land is left when you stop animal agriculture and how much food you have without even using all the land we have, and it would feed the world. Have a look at this following meme. How can anybody look at that meme? That is from the largest study to date that I've mentioned, and I mention regularly. How can anybody look at that meme and not say, wow, that is really astonishing? We could actually feed the world with less land than with far less land. Like, did you see how many continents would be available to grow food if we stopped animal agriculture? How anybody could look at that meme and just dismiss it. I don't know how anybody could. We are on a trajectory for starvation if we continue on to using animal agriculture, and that's not taking into account that it's going to become, 3 degrees is set now. 3 degrees increase. That's a disaster. So personally, I think it's all over for us. Imminent extinction, human extinction, and taking a whole lot of animals with us. But if we go vegan, we can actually slow down that process, and we will not make it, but there will be other animals that may, other species that may. And wouldn't that be nice if we didn't take every fucking animal species with us? We deserve to go because look at the violence that we've done. Look at how appalling as a whole we've behaved. Patriarchy has failed catastrophically. Capitalism has been unfettered and apocalyptic. And it's time now for us to do the right thing at the last minute for animals and just stop using them. I'm probably repeating myself, but there's only so many ways. I really feel like this whole veganism is a personal choice, so we don't need to mention it thing is really just an excuse for not challenging the non-vegan public. And because there's a big donate button on Extinction Rebellion site, just like any just like any large animal group, they have big donate buttons. And at best, they merely mouth about veganism. They barely mention it. They mention a whole lot of other things, and they have a whole lot of single-issue campaigns that they ask people for money for, but they don't ask people to go vegan. You can belong to a large animal organization. You don't have to be vegan. That's ridiculous. How on earth can you be for animal rights, for the end of use of animals, and not be vegan? That's like I've given the example of an abolitionist saying, I own slaves, human slaves, but I'm for the end of human slavery. That's ridiculous. You see what I'm saying? So these large animal organizations, they have big donate buttons, but they never ask people to go vegan. And the reason they don't do that is because they don't want to challenge their non-vegan donors. They want them to give them donations. And I almost knew before I even looked at the Extinction Rebellion site that I would see a large donate button at the top. I knew that I would see that because I can think the only reason you have nothing to lose if you are just being honest and saying, okay, I'm vegan and we all need to be vegan because animal agriculture is the greatest driver of the climate crisis and all those other things I mentioned, the 6th mass extinction and all of that. We need to go vegan, all of us. That's the moral baseline now, that we need to go vegan. And also because we don't need to kill sentient animals, right? There's nothing stopping you from saying that except if you don't want to challenge the public because you want to ask them for donations and you don't want to seem like you're challenging them in any way because you want those donations. That's the only reason I can see for people not doing this. And these sort of weak source excuses like veganism is a personal choice, that doesn't fly. Particularly, it's just science denying at this point. Okay? It doesn't fly, and the personal is the political. I thought we had that all settled by now, that people understood that. You have to actually walk the walk, don't you? You don't go around saying, You don't go around sort of saying, I'm against child slavery, and yet purchase a whole lot of items continually where you know that children are being enslaved to make those items, right? That doesn't make any sense. You don't say you're against apartheid and against the executing of innocent Palestinians and make donations to a pro-Israel site, or pro-Israel organizations who support apartheid, do you? I mean, these are all personal choices too, right? You could put it that way. You could put it all down to personal choice, couldn't you? I mean, you can say, it's a personal choice if I don't have a child. And by the way, this whole birthright thing, yes, having children is a disaster. I see people having babies right now and I think, oh my God, don't you sort of think, what on earth are you bringing these children into the world for at this point? By the time they're 30, it could be all over and it'll be awful up until that point. Or 40. And it won't just suddenly happen, it'll be by degrees and if there's a big 50 gigaton burp of methane from the East Siberian Arctic shelf from all the melting, because the ice caps are melting, everything is melting now, it could shoot up, to 5 degrees Celsius in single-digit years. If you watch The End of Ice on Contact with Chris Hedges, The End of Ice with Dar Jamal, where he interviews Dar Jamal about his book, The End of Ice.
We have begun the 6th great mass extinction, driven by our 150-year binge on fossil fuel. We are pouring greenhouse gases into the atmosphere at 10 times the rate of the mass extinction known as the Great Dying 252 million years ago. The glaciers in Alaska alone are losing an estimated 75 billion tons of ice every year. The oceans, which absorb over 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, are warming and acidifying, melting the polar ice caps and resulting in rising sea levels and oxygen-starved ocean dead zones. We await a 50 gigaton burp or pulse of methane from thawing Arctic permafrost beneath the East Siberian Arctic shelf, which will release about 2/3 of the total carbon dioxide pumped into the atmosphere since the beginning of the industrial era. Some 150 to 200 species of plant, insect, bird, and mammal are going extinct every 24 hours, 1,000 times the natural or background rate. This pace of extinction is greater than anything the world has experienced since the disappearance of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago.
He explains all that. This is what people are bringing children into the world to have to go through. That's sort of, I don't understand that. I really don't. But see, this is the thing. Humans like to breed, and governments promote breeding. Governments promote humans breeding because capitalism wants more and more consumers, right? So, people just keep breeding. So, even though it's a great idea to suggest people, people have said to me, sorry, there's a few little mosquitoes around. People have said to me, better than veganism, just don't have any children. Well, good luck getting people to stop breeding. And by the way, you can be vegan and you can decide not to have children. I don't have children, although when I decided not to have children, it was for different reasons because I didn't realize at the time how dire things were. But, I decided for different reasons. But I'm glad I don't have children now to have to go through what's coming. We're going to experience what's coming. It's not just them. We are going to experience it. So anyway, even though it's a great suggestion to people not to have children, but I mean, okay, that's not better than veganism though. You can be vegan and you can decide not to have children. That's a great thing. See, it's not an either or. I don't know why people make this an either or. Oh, not having children, that's better than veganism, so we won't mention veganism. See all these excuses? These are just all excuses of not to have to change our own personal lives. And that's why I said in my last video, and I think this often, as a species, I think we are too stupid to live. I seriously do. Because even at this stage, with the gun at our heads and the trigger is pulled back and it's almost halfway to the release, right? We are still making excuses for weak source reasons for not doing the right thing, for not doing the logical thing. Anything, any excuse so that we don't have to do anything from our side. You know that saying, everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves. Have you heard that saying? I think it's Tolstoy. It's so true. Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to do anything in their own lives to change themselves. And how does the world change? By all of us changing. You know that saying, peace is the way, being peace is the way to peace. So if we want to have if we claim we are for nonviolence, and if we claim we are for justice, then a first step to a nonviolent, just life is to be vegan. That's my position. And then everything else goes from there. And if we claim that we care about world hunger, if we claim that we care about the Amazon rainforest being destroyed, if we claim that we care about the oceans being wiped out, if we claim that we care about the droughts and the floods and climate refugees, if we claim that we care about animals, then we have to be vegan. If we're frightened about the water shortages, then we have to be vegan. If we're frightened about the dreadful fires, then we have to be vegan. And all of that. If we're frightened about the dead zones in the ocean, and there's more and more of them, then we have to be vegan. If we're horrified about all the different animals, all the different aquatic animals that are being scooped up in these large fishing nets that drag across the ocean floor, and that most of them are just tossed overboard like nothing. Millions and millions of tons of sentient lives just tossed overboard like they're nothing. And then the other target fish flap around on the deck and suffocate. And all those that are tossed into the ocean are dead. All of that for what? Palate pleasure, because we don't need those animals to survive. So we have to really reassess the indoctrination, and we have to push through our speciesism so that we can see clearly what we have to do. It ceases to be a quote-unquote personal choice when it involves that much killing, when it involves the destruction of their planet and our planet. It ceases to be a personal choice. If I see any other comments, I'm just addressing that one thing because I haven't had time. I've been out all day and I haven't had time to see the other comments, and I'm a little tired, but if I see any other comments, I'll address them tomorrow. I'm sure I probably could have made a better case for this but I haven't had time to really think about it too much. But I really just wanted to make that point about personal choice. The personal is the political, and we should not separate the two. And seeing it's such a central factor in the destruction of the planet, it is ridiculous to ignore it and pretend that it's something that we can do. It's optional, but it's really, it's just up to you. It's just it's just a personal choice. It makes no sense. And I'm surprised people make that argument. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say, so I hope that you go vegan. Please check out my comprehensive vegan resource, howtogovegan.org. And it's a comprehensive vegan resource in podcast form. Please check it out. And I'll look at the other comments in the comments section. Please like if you like the content. Please leave comments. I'll address those too in another video when I have some time. And please subscribe and click the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive updates. So thanks very much for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.